this man like just spoiled me for the past 4 years with all this romance, and now it's all about him being glued to the computer screen.
And there was this unhealthy expectation that, pornography was supplying to me as a standard for what sex should be.
I mean, I didn't understand what am I doing wrong here? And so I became really desperate, very hurt. And I knew that I was presented with a line drawn in the sand.
Welcome to Hope Reforged, the podcast where we champion married couples from pornography addiction to a life of freedom, restoration, and unity. We know the road can be tough, but we're here to walk it together. It's time to break free from the chains of fear and shame. Experience Hope Reforged.
I think an important thing for us to talk about that is not pleasant is your testimony and your side of the story. I don't think it's one either of us really like looking at, but I think it's important to share that.
Yeah.
So want to open up the table for you to dive into your story and what you were going through and what your process was as this came out. I know it's painful even now. I'm not looking forward to it myself, hearing all the pain I caused you.
Time does not heal all wounds. That's a really stupid saying. I don't know who came up with it, but it was totally false. But God heals all wounds. And so he has taken me through an amazing process lovingly. He never rushed me. He always knew when it was the right time to take the next step.
Yeah.
So, I would say it all starts out with every girl's dream of what a marriage is going to be like. This wonderful expectation.
This Disney World fantasy that we're all fed.
Yeah, we've seen for so many years from Hollywood and from Disney where she's the most beautiful girl in the country, and the one that asks her to marry him is always going to be faithful, and there's never going to be any other woman that compares to her. There's all of these things that we expect, and as young children, there's a lot of really beautiful pictures that are painted, and I believe it's the way that the Lord intends for marriage to be. In the heavenly realm, there is no need for marriage, but what he originally created in the Garden of Eden was majestic, and they Adam and Eve, I believe, were they were only two humans at first, but they were faithful to each other and in unity.
And they lived happily forever for
Chris,
the rest of their days.
You pursued me so well. I mean, I have a box of love letters still from 1991 when we started dating, and
there was just a huge outpouring while we were dating of this affection for you.
Yes, yeah, an expression of, oh my gosh, the man you're so creative already, but you just wrote beautiful, beautiful poems. Not really poems, but it was just exactly what my soul wanted to hear. And we were dating and engaged for a total of 3.5 years. So I got that's a lot of romance. And our first year was really good, I would say. Everybody was telling us, warning us, the first year is going to be hard. It's like, no, this is actually really good. I like it. This is fun. And then year 2 is when everything started just disintegrating, as you were we got our first computer. We got this massive desktop computer, hooked it up to the internet, and then that fed all of this all of the wounds that you had been hiding.
That was dial-up back then.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. That was not very good. You need to try.
I'll work on that.
Perfect your dial-up sound.
Yep.
Sound effects. So the first year matched the image that I had always expected to see and kind of had fantasized about. And then year 2, I started becoming really jealous of the computer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, he is in, it was a little duplex. It was a 2-bedroom duplex. We had a 1-car garage attached to it. It was actually very nice for that time. And we were first years of marriage. That's a pretty spacious place. And he had the second office. I mean, the second bedroom set up as an office. Right. And that's where the huge desktop computer was. And we got
the computer for work. So there was work being done. But yeah, there was also, I had computer games that I played. And that we still have to be careful of to this day. There's still a tendency to retreat into those.
And then once you started delving into porn, which I didn't understand at the time, you'd be up so late to the wee hours of the morning. And I would just get so furious at that computer. I would fantasize about taking it apart, breaking the motherboard in half, and then putting it back together.
That's detailed.
Yeah. Well, I actually knew how to put computers together back then.
They were simpler than they are now, yeah.
So did you. Yeah, it was kind of like cars in the 80s are totally different than cars in the 2000s. Anyway, so I would get really jealous of your time spent there, and just really, that started hardening my heart toward you, to be honest, because I was just like, this man just spoiled me for the past 4 years with all this romance, and now it's all about him being glued to the computer screen, to the monitor. But then another thing started happening in that little duplex. Our physical relationship changed. Mm-hmm. It was all about, the sexual relationship in marriage. I believe God intended it to be where we're both preferring one another. We're both laying ourselves down and preferring one another for this act of marriage. And sex was really wonderful, and you were sensitive and caring and
attentive,
but then things started to change. And it became a lot more selfish. And you started saying things to me that were just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, we should incorporate this into
I'm not measuring up. There were all these messages coming at me from you that I wasn't measuring up. And so my self-esteem started crashing and burning, because I was going from this 4-year high of I'm the ultimate woman, to the love of his life, to you're not quite cutting it.
Well, and there, from my side, there was also, I had been introduced to pornography at a much younger age, and I had the expectation as a Christian that marriage was going to be the place where this would get resolved, right? And, for the first year, it was fantastic. It was great. It was wonderful. And then, as the pornography got introduced again back into my life in a more
full force,
it was, well, I want to have these experiences that we're not doing, and I don't know that we're ever going to have. And, maybe I can just try to bring, these unfulfilled desires into the marriage relationship. And, and there was this unhealthy, expectation that, pornography was supplying to me as a standard for what sex should be, that I'm trying, that there's this disconnect here of, well, I thought marriage was going to fix this. And now there's all these desires I have that aren't being met by marriage. And so it was also a disillusion of what that fantasy was from my side too.
In a previous episode, you kind of compared, the purity of marriage to porn as, you've been eating this really healthy fruit
Oh,
It's delicious. It's appealing. It's just so good. And then you start having a Snickers bar.
Yep.
What's it like to go back to that delicious?
If you're eating a bowl of fresh strawberries
fruit.
when you're hungry, right? And they're, you're wanting something, and then you get that, and it's fresh and it's sweet and everything. But then you had a Snickers bar, this artificial nasty thing, right? That's got all these chemicals in and everything, and artificially sweetened to a very high level. And now you go back to the strawberry and it doesn't taste so good anymore.
Right.
So there is definitely that component, which is what pornography does.
Yeah. So our sexual relationship became a lot more about you, and then me feeling like I was defeated because
weren't measuring up.
I didn't understand what am I doing wrong here. And so I became really desperate, very hurt, confused is a good word for that time in our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of rejection that started happening. And so, again, massive switch. It's like I'm married to a different person. This is not who I knew for the past 4 years. This is a totally different person, 4.5 years probably, somewhere in there. So the deception that came to me that I bought into was I was failing. That I was the one making our marriage fail. And so I became more and more, I guess, disillusioned. And not realizing that you were up to your eyeballs, you're up to your neck in this addiction, because it took a hold so fast.
It did.
It just changed.
Yeah, in a matter of months. Yeah. Yep. And then there is a, just how quickly the degradation of your thought processes can erode. How quickly your mind gives over to that sin, and just starts to affect your life is frightening. So,
I would say, looking at this from a spiritual kind of perspective, it's like the snake comes and starts talking to you about, did he really love you? Like the snake came to Eve in the garden. Did God say, was he truly in love with you? Was he really committed? All of those lies started coming in. And so around year 3 or 4, I'm going to say year 4 of our marriage. So this was 98.
Yeah. So we're walking through this for about 3.5 years or so.
Yeah. Of just, horrendous, just feeling like less than person, like I'm a horrible wife and all that. Around year 4 of our marriage, we had bought our first house. And that was that day that you were just so depressed. And I'm just going, what is wrong with him? I'm like going about my day, just like, what is his deal?
Yeah.
And finally, I went upstairs to the guest bedroom where you had been all day, just like, really, I don't know. You were falling apart. And you confessed. And I knew that I was presented with a line drawn in the sand. There was a decision that needed to be made here. And again, like I said in the previous episode when you were giving your testimony, I just felt this big no, this isn't happening.
Right, because I presented my solution to you.
We're not getting divorced. We're going to try something. We're going to try anything. And then I went downstairs after that discussion and just was in shock, complete shock. What just happened?
Did you feel like some pieces fell into place after that? Or were you you weren't able to make any?
No, I was completely numb, but the enemy pounced on me at that point in time. It was just like, okay, here, now I've got you. Fear, regret, anxiety, just complete rejection. I wasn't attractive, not wanted. I started thinking there were all these young men in our youth group that either asked my dad that if they could date me, or they asked, they wanted to date me or whatever. And I'm just going, did I make a bad choice? There was a lot of that going on. So the enemy just started flooding me with all of these emotions. And so, yeah, I would say fear was the number one thing, because it's just like nobody can know. No one outside of this household can know what's going on.
So your initial reaction once the confession came out was, for me, telling you, I think we need to get divorced. And your initial reaction through the Holy Spirit was, no, we're going to fight for our marriage. Not until we've at least put some effort in, at least. Right. And then you went downstairs. How did you work through all of that garbage that came up then as a result of that, and continue to make the decision to, well, I said we're going to work through this, so I guess I'm going to stick with that.
Yeah. I've kind of made a commitment already, saying, let's go to counseling, let's try something. But there's just a lot of confusion. I wouldn't say I was able to work through it at all. It was just this jumbled mess. So I kind of put words to it recently. I felt like I had been just blindfolded, dropped into the middle of the darkest jungle with nothing, like no survival tools. And which way is north? Like, how do I get out? And there's all these predators, and, it was the scariest moment of my life, because all of everything had been wrapped around our union. You were such a big part of the previous, several years. So it was I
remember all this side note. I remember all this pressure we put on ourselves to go out and pick like our China pattern, right? Because we wanted engaged. It to be a Chris and Angela pattern. It was our
had to be perfect.
Wedding was going to be encapsulated by this China pattern that we picked out at Dillard's or whatever. These stupid ideas that we had in our head.
And our furniture, that was a big deal too.
Right. Yeah.
It has to be right.
It has to be us.
Back in the 90s, people actually wanted China for wedding gifts. I'm so glad we didn't get any China, because we never could pick out the China. We had a huge fight.
Yeah.
We could never pick it out.
You wanted this more impressionistic thing. I wanted something more rigid. And it was like, no, we have to find the right China.
Had this huge fight, and everybody was staring at us in the store.
Yeah.
Anyway, we decided, well, just forget that.
Forget China.
We're not doing China. I'm just so glad we didn't, because we're not China people.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, but these illusions that we had about what marriage was supposed to look like, that were just totally based on this this false illusion, or this false fantasy. So here I am in this major place of fear. It just took over, pretty much swallowed me whole, is what it felt like. I thought that I needed to protect us. I need to protect the marriage. From outsiders, including family members. Like, I didn't want anyone to know what was going on. I was so afraid. And so, because I thought more rejection will just come, more rejection. And I've already been dealt this huge rejection. So why would I take on more? And so I put on this facade, this persona of just being, everything's okay, while we figure out how to stop the bleeding. How do we get out of this? And so we very, very cautiously begin talking to friends about, how's your marriage? Hey, just asking for a friend, kind of deal. Right.
And I remember having a couple over to our house for dinner.
Well, and I mean, we set up, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we did set up a counseling session pretty quickly.
Well, but the way we got there was, we had this couple over for dinner, and they started talking about, we're having some issues with our marriage, but we're going to this we were all ears. It's just like, oh, who's the counselor?
Tell us of this counselor.
And what's
his phone number?
Yeah, exactly. Again, asking for a friend.
Yeah.
So it ended up, he was the perfect counselor for us, because he specialized in sex addictions and helping Christians to get into an accountability group. And he actually helped put these accountability groups together. It was amazing. So the Lord,
I think
really,
he led me to that initial.
he started putting those together himself. Yeah, it was really good. And so I, all of that, God, if we had been more transparent back then, I think, but the Lord provided again. There's a need for transparency on both sides. But we got into this. So our first step forward was to visit this counselor.
Mm-hmm.
And we told him what was going on. And I think it was our very first session with him. He looked at me and he said, "Angela, it's not about you." And I got so angry. In my head, in my imagination, I was slapping him upside the head. So I'm just like, I'm kicking him. And I'm sitting there going, "What do you mean? It's not about me. That doesn't make any sense." And then he started explaining to me, there are hurts that your husband has had that has, been left these gaping holes in his soul that he's been trying to fill with this pornography. It's not about your beauty, your attractiveness. And that's how women take it. It's a massive attack against, what do I have to offer?
Today's episode of Hope Reforged is brought to you in part by C12, a nationwide mentoring framework of transformation for Christian business leaders. Find community at joinc12.com.
And I had no clue whatsoever on what was happening on the other side of this. I didn't know. This was pre-John Eldridge teachings and stuff, Bald at Heart. I had no idea about, what the man's question was, what the woman's question was, in terms of how they see their identity and what the big things that they ask that help them derive their identity.
The way God created us is, and John and Stacey Eldridge put it so succinctly, is the woman's question that she always needs an answer to is, am I worth pursuing? Am I worth pursuing? And I got a solid no.
No. Yeah.
A huge no.
Yeah.
The computer is worth pursuing. This fantasy world is worth pursuing, but not you. You're not worth the effort. Yeah. The man's question that he's always asking is, do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes? Do I have the strength in me to defend when it's needed, to protect? And you gotta know.
Man, I gotta know. Yep.
Because I was so rejected.
Yep.
I took it as a complete rejection, personally. And here's this counselor saying, "You know what? You shouldn't take this." He doesn't say it this way, but it's almost like, "Angela, you shouldn't take this personally because it's not about you." Well, it is. It is and it isn't. The driving factor is not, I'm sure you didn't have this conscious thought of, my wife really isn't as attractive as I thought she was. And so I'm going to find something else that's more.
I did not.
I left a pause for you to fill in.
Nudge, nudge. No, but you have always been incredibly attractive to me, but the draw of pornography, the draw of that quick dopamine hit, even at that time, you're not really aware of what the processes are going on, but that addictive reward cycle that you get in, that you look to relieve stress and stuff, it's just, you don't even really enter into the equation of, do I want to choose my wife or do I want to choose this? It's just, this is just a habit I have to deal with this stuff.
Well, and, in some ways, I could be jealous of how your brain works because men can compartmentalize so easily. Women cannot compartmentalize. Everything's connected. Everything in the world is connected.
Right.
And so, but men have these nice little tidy sections of their brain that says, okay, here's my married life. But then over here is this thing that makes me feel good that I can access from my phone or my computer or whatever. And so those two don't connect, which to women makes no sense whatsoever. Well, it is about me, So anyway, so that counselor, we did continue to go to him, even though I got really angry. And I started to understand the more that I read a book called Every Man's Battle, which was painful to read, but at the same time, I also learned a lot. Not too long after that, while you were going to the accountability group, I was reading that book and I started learning. Okay, this is how men are involved in porn. Like, this is how they get involved in pornography. This is how it works.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still, there was still the pain. There's a very personal impact here, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that the Lord led me to, I love this classic book. Stormy O'Martin read a book called The Power of the Praying Wife. Millions of copies have been sold, and so it's really impacted many marriages, I'm sure. But she goes like page by page, there's a different prayer just to pray over your husband. And so I started doing that because I didn't know what else.
Oh, Lord, smite him.
Yeah. Give him boils like Job.
Right.
Especially in a certain area.
Oh, my gosh.
No, sorry. That's oh, the things that pop out of my mouth sometimes. Okay. But no, these were more constructive prayers.
Yeah.
And so I started praying through that book, and then I got to the end and I prayed it again. And all this time you were going through your accountability group. It was called Living Waters. Yeah. And that book was like 3 inches thick. So I was just impressed about that. Okay, he's going to this wonderful Living Waters group where he's got accountability partners that they can call each other at 3:00 in the morning.
Yep.
But there's also this huge book that's hundreds and hundreds of pages. So I'm like, okay, this is good. This is a big commitment. So I'm reading through The Power of a Praying Wife. And I always cry when I talk about this, and I can't help it because it's so powerful. The Lord just showing up. When I would wake up in the middle of the night and there was no husband laying in the bed next to me because he was upstairs looking at porn. I would wake up in the middle of the night and just cry out to God. I started learning to cry out to him as my eternal husband. And that changed everything. His presence would come and I would feel peace, even though I knew what was going on in the other room. It was just like, I have this. And I know that this is true, that Jesus is with me and he is my eternal husband. He is never, ever going to reject me.
Yeah.
And he was my, I think I first started seeing him as my shepherd, coming and caring for one of his lambs. But then as I was turning to him more and more, it was just like, oh, he's not just shepherd. He's also a husband.
Mm-hmm.
And he's that husband that will never, ever fail. And so that...
My rock and my fortress.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we did not do, one of the things I think that would have helped our relationship a lot more is we did not put any consequences in place.
That's right.
And
I
didn't
wish
even,
we had.
Yeah, that's one thing I do as I talk with other guys. Something I like, you guys need to sit down as a couple and work this out. And we did not do that. And I think my whole recovery process took a lot longer because of that. Not that I wasn't trying to work out of it.
For sure.
But I also didn't put a whole lot of stuff in place in terms of like, well, if I go back to this, there's going to be these consequences.
The whole consequence thing is a more recent idea that you and I have learned about, and I think there's a lot of benefit to that.
Yeah.
So I think our journey took a little over 6 years, somewhere around 7 years. But regardless, just the work that the Lord did in us, not everybody has the resources that are available in a highly populated area. Are there counselors close by? Is there a small group? Fortunately, there's so many options online.
Yeah.
Because of that, there are ways to get that support. But yeah, I would say the Lord, and I did talk to some very close friends. I still hadn't talked to any family members. That was something that I was just really afraid of.
Being exposed,
being exposed, being rejected. You being rejected, I think, was my main motivation. I didn't want you to be rejected. But
I didn't want to be rejected either.
Yeah. So the more I cried out to the Lord, the more open my heart was to Him, and the more He comforted me. The Holy Spirit was so my comforter. That's the perfect name for Holy Spirit, is comforter. And so then, all right, so fast forward a little bit more. In 2004, I went to a women's conference in Colorado, and it was called Captivating. Mm-hmm. Stacy Eldridge was the leader of that conference and had several co-leaders. It was, I think, maybe a 3-day. I don't remember exactly.
Sounds about right.
This is 20 years ago. So she, the teachings that she and the other ladies brought. Well, there's a book out called Captivating for Women that is outstanding. Oh my gosh, love it! I love it, love it, love it. But I had been reading that book while we were going through those trials. Then I found out, hey, there's a conference. Like, I've got to go. And so I actually went twice. But in 2004, the Lord had done so much work in me through that conference and just making my heart more and more tender. And He showed up in even more powerful ways at that conference, that I came home and I forgave you. And I told you, I forgive you. And
you had told me you forgive me a lot throughout the process.
Yeah, but I forgive you for this incident. You would come and confess, hey, I've looked at porn again. Okay, I forgive you. And it was for that incident. It wasn't for the overall transgression, right? And so when I came home in 2004, I said, Chris, I forgive you of all of it. I am not holding this against you anymore. And that was a game changer because it opened up a connection between us.
How did you get to that place?
Well, like I said, there was a lot of time spending with the Holy Spirit whenever I was hurt. But then again, I went to this conference and I had been reading about God's truth about who I am.
Yeah.
Because, when the whole confession came out, like I said, the enemy was ready to pounce and tell me, you're rejected, you're not beautiful, you're not attractive, there's nothing that you have to offer, et cetera, et cetera. All of those lies were undone over those years where Holy Spirit was speaking to me. I'm reading this book. I'm praying for our marriage. All of those little seeds that were planted that were undoing those lies. We're rooting out all of those lies about who I am as a person. So the Lord's really restored my identity.
One of the things that you learn through the John and Stacy Eldridge, through their teachings, when they talk about these questions, am I worth pursuing? Do I have what it takes? We often turn to worldly things to try and get that question answered. Usually, either my parents, for the answer to that question, or if we don't get it from there, we turn to, our spouse. We're looking for people to answer this question for us, or things to answer this question for us. Ultimately, the answer to these questions should be coming from God. Right?
Absolutely.
And so, I think for my process and probably your process, well, I'm going to speak for you, you have these events in your life where you finally do take that question to the Lord and He answers it for you.
He was revealing just how precious I was.
Mm-hmm.
And also the reminders of why I was created, as I was reading these different materials, these different books and listening to teachings, I so appreciated Him setting me up for that, because he put those, I feel like He put those books in my life at the right time.
Yep.
And the conference, so there were different avenues that He was sending me these messages of, no, you're perfectly fine the way I created you.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
You're doing and being what I created you to do. And I remember when I was a preteen, or, maybe, 12, 13, 14 years old, I hated the fact that I was female.
Mm.
There was so much that I did not look forward to in becoming a woman, and just there was a lot of things I was just like, God, why? And I really felt like He answered so many of those questions while I was going through this trial, while I was learning about my identity. He just restored. He opened my eyes, I would say. And so instead of taking it, your actions, your choices to go to porn as, this is my fault, He just completely reversed that whole thing and said, no, I'm pleased. I'm very pleased. You're exactly what I had in mind.
I'm pleased with you, not with me.
No, He's saying, I'm pleased, Angela. I'm pleased with how I made you. You're exactly the way that I designed you to be. And there's nothing else that you need to do.
Because my brokenness was giving you a bad answer to that question.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I came home from that conference. I forgave you, like the whole deal.
The big forgive.
And that, I would say, transformed our marriage in a way to where I no longer saw you as a threat.
Mm.
And I no longer saw you as an enemy, right? And so that's around the time that the Lord showed me, there were actually that noose that was around Chris's neck that kept him in that pornography addiction cycle. There was actually a noose around your neck as well. And those two nooses, it was a double-ended noose. And the more you pulled away from Him because of the rejection, and the more anger that you had toward Him, the tighter both nooses would get.
Right.
And so when I forgave, the noose was broken. And we really did start that walk of coming back together. So we actually received healing from the Lord through each other after that happened. It was amazing how much growth we had after I forgave. And it wasn't just about my forgiveness. It was both sides. You had been committed to this process and you fulfilled it. You were very conscious about your actions. And so you followed through. And I forgave. So we were able to be restored.
And I wouldn't say like, ever since 2004, life has been roses. I mean, we've had our ups and downs for sure, and our battles and stuff. But, I think having walked through that valley of death, if you will,
yeah,
gave us the foundation, I think, that we were missing early in our marriage, to be able to deal with some stuff. And we've been through some difficult stuff, I mean, not so much like me against you. I mean, we've been much more united ever since then to be able to walk through some very difficult things, which I don't know that we would have even tried to walk through difficult things previously without having this foundation.
I think we really both had to be restored to the Father for us to be able to walk through the other things.
Yep. You had to get rid of the illusions that we had about, and get those, the questions, the big questions answered from the Father.
I heard a friend say one time, disillusionment is actually a good thing, because who wants to live in an illusion?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, yeah, that's true. I mean, that's really, the truth leads to freedom. It always does. Every time, every single time. And when the truth comes out, you have to deal with it. But the fruit of it that will last is freedom. If you allow God's process in it. And thank God. I mean, all of this is through His grace. Oh, all right. I can breathe now.
Yeah. It's always emotional to go back and
dig it
up and pull it out and look at it, what that process was. But it's I think also why we're here now and where we're at, this other side of the valley of death.
Well, it's, we're wanting other marriages to be restored.
Yeah. Well, and to know that there's, that you may be on the pathward down into this dark place, but there's a path out of it on the other side, and it leads to a much higher place than where you started, from a metaphor standpoint. But yeah, know that there's hope, and there is a journey and a path that you're on, and the Lord is faithful to bring you the resources you need, the material you need. And, as long as you stay committed to walking the path with Him, I think.
But all that aside, I mean, whether it's through a marriage difficulty or many other trials,
crises,
I think it's all about being restored to what the Father says about us.
Yeah.
We can't believe everything that we were told when we were growing up.
Or that the enemy tells us about us.
That the enemy is telling us and sowing seeds in. It's all about being restored to what He says.
Yeah.
And what He says is good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yep.
Like that.
For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future.
Jeremiah 29:11.
29:11. Yep. No, that's the promise God has for us, and that's what we need to hang on to.
Thank you for joining us on Hope Reforged. Together, we can break the chains of addiction and rebuild hope. To stay connected, visit us at www.hopereforged.com, where you'll find new episodes, resources, and support. If you found this helpful, please leave us a review and share it with someone who would be encouraged by this podcast. Until next time, persevere, lean into hope, and remember that restoration is yours.